Jackson Pollock gained fame and fortune for pouring and dripping paint onto flat canvas. He basically made spills, intentional though they were, into something cool and valuable. But Pollock wasn't actually the first person to do this. That credit goes to Janet Sobel, a middle-aged Ukrainian-American woman who had never taken an art class. She dripped and spilled paint and also blew and tilted it in different directions to create the dynamic marbled surface of this 1945 work, Milky Way, at least a year before Pollock created similar work. But it was Pollock who became famous, while Sobel faded into obscurity. Why did that happen? Why do we take one person's dripped paint seriously and not the others? What's the difference between just an everyday amateur and an artist? Hi, I'm Sarah Urist Green, and this is Crash Course Art History. We know that Sobel directly influenced Pollock, who first encountered her paintings with art critic Clement Greenberg in 1944. Greenberg was impressed by Sobel's works and wrote about them. He considered hers the first truly all-over pictures he had ever seen, a term he coined for paintings that don't really have a focal point and treat the entire surface evenly. Some say the parts of Sobel's identity that drew attention to her at first also fueled her dismissal. After all, she was an outsider with no formal training, and it didn't help that Greenberg described her as a primitive painter and housewife living in Brooklyn. Essentially, Greenberg positioned her art as less serious than Pollock's. He considered her an amateur. If you look up synonyms for amateur, you get words like incompetent, useless, or unskilled. Pretty harsh. But society hasn't always treated amateurs this way. Back in early 18th century Paris, the term came with some respect. Amateur artists mingled, trained, and exhibited their work with the pros at the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture, which dominated the arts in France for almost 150 years. Being an amateur didn't mean you weren't good enough to be a professional. It meant you just didn't need the money. They were rich enough to study art for fun and cultural clout, rather than creating works for wealthy patrons. And when amateurs weren't making art themselves, they lectured, published scholarly hot takes, and shaped the tastes of the time. Take a look at this portrait of amateur artist Claude-Henri Vautelet. He's posing casually, implying that he and Jean-Baptiste Greuze, the professional artist painting him, are besties. Vautelet is deep in thought about that sculpture of Venus, while holding an art theory book he wrote open to a page of his own artwork. It's all designed to show us what a serious thinker and artist he is, even though he's considered an amateur. But the good vibes didn't last. By the mid-18th century, art criticism had grown more popular and started to appear in newspapers. This meant the wider public started to have opinions about art, and the once elite class of art lovers and tastemakers didn't care for this. So the meaning of amateur began to drift, and eventually the word picked up negative connotations. Folks started using it to refer to anyone who didn't fit the Academy's idea of an artist. Women in particular were quickly relegated to the category of amateur artists. When women and girls spent their free time making art, critics didn't think they were building careers or influencing culture, so they received little official recognition. But that didn't stop them from making art. Women created and displayed works in private, domestic spaces, and often expressed creativity through fashion. Some fashion plates from the time, which functioned sort of like 18th century Vogue magazines, show women modeling the hottest trends, with art supplies in hand. We're also continuing to learn more about how some women amateurs made it into Paris's official art spaces. In recent years, art historians have studied letters written by women who described themselves as students in the artist Jacques-Louis David's prestigious, almost exclusively male studio. And this young amateur, Alexandrine Brongniart, took drawing lessons from François Gérard, the same artist who painted this famous portrait of her. Unlike the portrait of Vautelet, this image doesn't reveal anything about Brongniart's artistic life. But a recently discovered version shows her holding a porte-crayon, a drawing tool that says, "I'm a serious artist." But critics at the time didn't acknowledge Brongniart as an artist in their reviews of the portrait. To them, it wasn't worth mentioning. As the years went on, official art spaces in Europe continued to draw distinct lines between the professional and the amateur. But across the Atlantic, some artists in the Americas were working outside those lines altogether. Let's head to the drawing board. In 1875, the U.S. government forcefully relocated 72 members of the Kiowa, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Comanche, and Caddo tribes from Oklahoma to Florida. All were accused of crimes against white settlers and imprisoned for 3 years at Fort Marion. In an effort to force them to adopt dominant American customs, they were made to cut their hair, wear military uniforms, and study the Bible. A young Kiowa warrior and artist named Woha was among the prisoners. He created sketches during the time he was imprisoned. Some show his life before incarceration, like this one, of a couple wrapped in a buffalo robe. Others reflect life in captivity, like this drawing of mourning lessons, observed by a transparent figure in traditional clothing. After 3 years in prison, Woha had a choice: return to a reservation or continue boarding school up north. A drawing from around that time echoes his dilemma. On one side, he's flanked by a buffalo and a Kiowa teepee. On the other, a domestic cow and farm. By then, the US government had already pushed the Kiowa and other groups off their land, while nearly exterminating the buffalo they depended on. Woha's drawing evokes a feeling of suspension between two cultures, personal to him, but shared by many indigenous people. In the drawing, Woha extends a peace pipe toward both animals. In life, he returned to a reservation, where he spent the rest of his years. Woha didn't study at an art academy or display work at the Paris Salon, but that doesn't make his art any less impactful, poignant, or worthy of preservation. In fact, his work has since been shown at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Smithsonian. But it wasn't until the 20th century that the mainstream art world started actually paying attention to work by artists like Woha, artists who hadn't received what officially counted as formal training. This led to new categories for organizing otherwise disparate types of art, which some called outsider art. It was also called self-taught art, visionary art, and intuitive art, among many other terms. In the 1940s, French painter Jean Dubuffet, for example, became fascinated by artwork made by children, incarcerated people, and psychiatric patients. He described their work as art brut, or raw art. To him, it was open, honest, and free from rules or greed. That made it better than work made by formally trained artists, at least in the eyes of Dubuffet. In the 1950s and 60s, other artists and collectors became interested in art brut, but Dubuffet wasn't having it and started refereeing its boundaries, weeding out the artist he once considered good but now viewed as too trained or deliberate. Sort of like those people who stop listening to a band once they go mainstream. But in defining this group, Dubuffet drew yet another box around who could be considered artists. So he just created a different, equally limiting definition: amateur hour. And also, my friends, one of the many reasons we won't be officially defining the word art in this series. Despite the popularity of art brut, recognition was hard to come by for outsider artists in the 20th century. Take, for example, artist Martin Ramirez. Born in Mexico, Ramirez moved to the United States in 1925 in search of work to support his family back home. But by 1931, he found himself unemployed, unhoused, and eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia. He spent the rest of his life in psychiatric institutions, including 15 years at the DeWitt State Hospital in California. There, he made hundreds of dynamic and complex drawings, using any materials he could find. In this one, geometric patterns close in around a horse and rider, evoking tension between freedom and containment. A local artist and psychology professor tried to draw attention to Ramirez's art, arranging exhibitions and mailing drawings to the Guggenheim Museum. Official recognition did ultimately come for Ramirez, but it wasn't until long after his death. These stories of who counts as an artist are powerful and still impact us today. The lines that divide inside and outside art worlds can seem like they're constantly shifting, because they are. Art is too slippery of a concept to capture with stark lines. And the value of art is wrapped up in so many biases, like those around class, gender, and race. In reality, art gets made under a lot of different circumstances. In official schools and light filled studios, yes, but also in hospitals, prisons, and homes. There's no one road that leads to being an artist, and recognition by the powers that be is unpredictable and fleeting. The more we explore art and artists outside of official spaces, the more we complicate what it means to be inside or outside, amateur or professional. And today, art historians recognize that it's not important to know who's in or out, but to instead explore the dynamic web of influences that inform all artists' work. Yesterday's amateur is today's subject of a massive museum show. Today's hot artist at auction might be relegated to museum storage tomorrow. And who knows what's in store for today's amateurs? Let's all be on the lookout. In our next episode, we'll explore the overlap between art and design. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching this episode of Crash Course Art History, which was filmed at the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields and was made with the help of all of these professional people. If you want to help keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, you can join our community on Patreon.